Good afternoon. How's everyone doing out there? Hope you're enjoying this janky setup I have going on today. If you're new here, hi. My name's Miles. I do music stuff. And at long last, today is the day I finally answered the call of the many requests and comments I've gotten on my videos and on Instagram and on TikTok. Today is the day that I do a tutorial on the main riff in Polyphia's Playing God. Part of the reason it's taken me so long to make this video in particular is just that, I've been tired. Boys been tired between streaming, working, and just running around with the family. But today, I'm buckling down and I'm making things happen. So, if you appreciate my effort, be sure to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. It's free and it makes me feel good. So do it. So get basic stuff out of the way first off. With this song, unlike ABC, we're in regular standard tuning. We're not going down a step and a half or anything like that. Your guitar's standard tuning is what we need for this song. As far as utilizing a nylon string guitar for this particular song, as they do on the recording, if you have one and you're proficient on it, there's no reason not to. But if you're someone who's played a electric guitar or an acoustic guitar that doesn't have the same dimensions as your traditional nylon string guitar, or you don't have the Tim Henson signature model, don't worry about it. You can still play it on a regular guitar. It's all going to work out. We're all going to be fine. Hopefully this angle works out well for you guys, because I was trying to make sure that my guitar was able to be seen without any real issue. I'll find out when I'm editing this, and if there's no video on Saturday the 20th, then you know why. So basically how I want to address this main part of the song is to break it down into separate segments so that later on, once you have these individual segments kind of figured out, you can then start merging them together and take that same approach to the other components, the other parts of the song, if you feel so inclined to do so. So we're going to start from measure 1. The phrase that we have is based off of an E minor chord, but it's being played up at the 10th fret of the A string in conjunction with the open low E string. And then the 9th fret on G and D. As far as finger placement, you want to start with your middle finger on the 10th fret of the A string, and your first finger is going to be barred over the 9th fret of D and G. Using these fingers is going to make sense for the remainder of the notes that are in this first measure that are being played as harmonics. So the first measure, it starts off with hitting low E and A at the same time, and then the 9th fret on G and D. And then it's followed by 4 harmonics going from high E, B, G, and then back to B, all on the 12th fret. If you don't know what harmonics are, number 1, why are you here? But number 2, basically all it means is that you're putting your finger up against the string without actually pressing it down. It's kind of a balancing act of making contact with the string without fretting it. So it doesn't matter what fingers you use for it, but because of how quick this phrase is going to go by, along with everything else in the song, using your pinky seems like the most sensible way to go about it. And you basically want to have your hand in a position where the least amount of movement is required. The other aspect of this song that's worth noting is that there's a lot of usage of what's called hybrid picking, and that's utilizing your other fingers on your picking hand in addition to a pick. So, like we were saying with that first measure, one way that you can approach playing those harmonics is to use your second and third fingers to grab those strings. I usually go with my second and third. If you want to incorporate the pinky, more power to you. I'm awful with utilizing my pinky. So, as far as what we have for measure 1, we have you guys still there? I hope so. Going into measure 2, things get a little bit more wild as far as the structure of what's going on and what's being played. Basically what's happening is that you're going to have your first finger on the 8th fret of low E, but then you have a lot of movement going on with your pinky on notes that are on the B and G strings, and then followed by another harmonic on high E, B, and G strings. But initially what you got is a stretch between the 8th fret of low E and the 13th fret of B. And then you have a lot of back and forth between the low E and the B string. But basically a good way to look at what's going on and dissect it into two separate parts is that you have your 8th fret on here, while at the same time you have... That's the other half without the low E string. You combine the two, and that's what the second measure is going to be. When you have multiple harmonics being played together, a good practice to keep in mind is to try to think about the idea of kind of rolling your finger. It's hard to see from this angle, but I'm like doing a gradual movement of my finger rather than just lifting off. If you implement the roll, you'll at least get better at maintaining contact with all the strings and getting sound from all the strings that you're trying to play harmonics on. And after you play that harmonic on the 12th fret of high E, B, and G, you're just hitting the low E string open. So, to reiterate what we have going on here, in measure 3, it starts off with the playing of what is a B dominant 7 chord. It's really only on low E, A, D, and G. But obviously if you hit the B string, it's in the chord, so it's fine. That's not the hard part. As far as how you're playing the chord, you're starting with your second finger on the 7th fret of low E, first finger on the 6th fret of A, and then your third finger on the 7th fret of D, and then throwing your pinky on the 8th fret of G. And after you play that chord once, you're going to do open B to the 7th fret of D. So if you noticed, I didn't move my hand to play those additional notes because they're in the chord. We're not moving those for those notes, but after those two notes, we're going to move up to the 14th fret of G, and you're playing 14th fret of G, a harmonic on the 12th fret of B, then going down to the 8th fret of G, and then playing harmonics on the 7th fret of B and high E. Now, when it comes to these harmonics that are on like the 5th and the 7th frets and whatnot, it's very important that you make sure or do your best to line up your finger that's fretting over the fret bar. Because if you're in the middle of the fret, you'll hear remnants of the harmonic, but you won't get the sustain. Like that's where the harmonic point actually exists. We only have frets on the guitar so that like when we play chords, it doesn't sound out of tune. But that's another video story for another time. So again, for measure 3, we got like that. So measure 4, it's utilizing a lot of the information that was in measure 3 note-wise, but it's being presented in a bit of a different manner. So we're no longer utilizing that B dominant 7 chord that we had in the previous measure. In this case, we're starting off with the 7th fret of low E and the 8th fret of G. And then you're going to go to the 10th fret of B then back to that note on G. So, like that. Where it gets a little squirrely is that right after you play the 8th fret of G again, you have harmonics on high E and B again, before you go back to that 8th fret of G. And then you would play both low E and G again. And then the 10th and 9th fret on A, and 12th fret harmonics on G, B, and high E. It's very awkward to play. You'll get comfortable with it playing it slow, and as you speed it up, you're going to be like questioning if you're playing it right. But it's okay. This is just the beginning. The rest of the song will have you thinking the same thing in many, many other instances. So now, measure 5. This one's pretty straightforward. You just got to make sure that you're placing your finger on the right fret and the right string at the right time. But we're starting off with a sort of simplified C chord, where you're playing the 8th fret of low E, first finger, and then your second finger is on the 9th fret of G, and your third finger's on the 10th fret of D. So you're skipping over the A string, and you're playing that one time. Then you have a series of harmonics, starting with the 12th fret of B, 7th fret of A, 7th fret of B, 5th fret of G, 7th fret of D, 7th fret of high E. And again, it's just a matter of making sure that you're placing your fingers right above the fret in each of those instances. You don't have to necessarily use any particular dedicated finger for all the harmonics, but first starting out, it might be helpful to do that before you start divvying out responsibilities to multiple fingers, just to kind of get a visual sense of where you need to be and where your hand needs to be placed. So now we're on to measure 6, which, by the way, if you want to follow along with this stuff and know that the notes that you have are accurate, Polyphia has the tabs for this song and like a bunch of the other stuff on their website. I think it's $1. And yeah, you know, you'd have the PDF of the song, and you also get a Guitar Pro file as well. So you can upload it into Guitar Pro, slow it down, do whatever you need to do. You can loop parts, which is incredibly useful. And yeah, it's straight from the source. So I encourage you all to do that if you haven't already. But anyway, so measure 6 starts out with these 2-note chords that basically you have opposing directions going on with each of them. So basically what you got going on, when we split it in half, you have on low E, and then 5/4 on G. So you're starting out spread out between the 2nd and 5th frets with your index and your pinky finger, and then using the same fingers and just bringing them in a half step. Now from there, you have a series of notes and harmonics. So you're going from the 12th fret on G, sliding down, and then playing the high E string open. So you almost have the same thing twice, except when you go to the 10th fret on D, you're not sliding anywhere. You're just playing the 10th fret and then the open B string. So, and then harmonics on the 12th fret of G and high E. So, and as far as what finger you're using to slide, it doesn't really matter. But I guess going from your second finger would make the most sense so that you can grab the 10th fret of D with your first finger. Now, when it comes to measure 7, we start back up again with that B7 chord that we had from before. And then we're doing the same move that we did in that previous measure. So, hitting that chord, playing open B in the 7th fret of D, sliding up to the 14th fret of G, playing a harmonic on the 12th fret of B, and then harmonics on the 7th fret of B and high E, along with a fretted note on the 8th fret of G. So like this. So that's the same thing that we had from earlier. Where it gets a little weird is in measure 8, because it goes back to that B chord, and then you have a series of single notes within the chord itself. So you have open high E to the 8th fret on G, and then the 6th fret of A, which is where your first finger is, and then the 7th fret of D. And then after you play that, this is kind of weird, but you're playing octaves, and not in the way that you would normally do it, but you're playing the 3rd fret of low E and the 3rd fret of high E, go down to the 2nd fret on both the strings, and then the 11th fret of low E, 12th fret of A, and the 11th fret of high E. So, now you'll find as you go through these parts, if you don't have the music in front of you to see all the articulations that are being noted, you're going to find that there's certain spots where you might find it a bit more helpful to palm mute a bit as you're playing, just to kind of maintain control over what's going on. So like, for example, right there, that's a very awkward move to make as far as like playing the notes physically, especially fast. So what I've been trying to implement for myself is like sweeping a little bit on low E and A, and then going up to high E, just to kind of maintain some control over everything. And with a slight palm mute, just to have it not be like overlapping over each other. But that's what's going on for the main part in Playing God. So just like with any Polyphia song, I encourage you just to take your time. Take your time with it and really kind of observe what it is that your hands are doing as you play through the different parts of the song. There's the section that follows after the first solo in the song, Scotty's solo, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on after that. If you just take your time with it and break it down into these smaller segments like we did today, you're going to find that you're not only going to see more success with the song overall, but you're going to have a better retention of the information, because it is a lot of info to keep track of. And once you start speeding things up, you want to be in a position where you're not trying to remember a sequence of notes and whatnot on the fly. You want to be anticipating playing those future notes. So, yeah, take your time, but also don't expect any sort of instant gratification, because there is none. Yeah, that's it. All right, y'all. So that's really kind of it for today. I hope you found this lesson to be interesting and informative. And if there's other songs that you want me to do sort of like in-depth tutorials on, feel free to let me know. Shoot me a comment, shoot me an email, whatever. I already do stuff like this over on my Patreon. So if you want to like go over there and check out what I got for you over there, you'd be helping out a whole bunch. Because that's how I fund everything for this channel. But with all that said, that's all I got for you guys for today. I will see you soon. Stay healthy, stay safe, and keep playing. Peace. I normally turn to my desk, but I'm already here. So